Another story I want to read for you guys here. This is still having to do with Ron DeSantis in Florida. This, I think, is really disturbing. Right-wing propaganda outlet Prager used materials approved for schools in Ron DeSantis' Florida. Holy fucking shit. What does this mean, folks? This means that they're going to start actually teaching PragerU videos, right? So I'm sure all of you out there who are into politics probably know who PragerU is. And if you don't know, it's Dennis Prager. He's a bullshit merchant. Right? Dennis Prager is a conservative bullshit merchant, a radio show host, who's just sort of like he's like the poor man's Ben Shapiro. He's not edgy enough. He's not edgy like Steven Crowder, or, he's not crazy like Alex Jones. He's sort of like Ben Shapiro if Ben Shapiro was not as nerdy and 40 years older and also not as stupid. He's actually smarter than Ben Shapiro is, in my opinion. Ben Shapiro's a fucking moron. Dennis Prager is more of like an old man conservative who knows exactly how far to push it and never goes over that edge. But still, remember, they're saying the same stupid shit. Like, he's sort of that old school Judeo-Christian kind of thing where it's really just all a cover for big business. That's what conservatism was 15 years ago, back during the Bush era. That's what he is. He's sort of like a Bush era conservative, where they would say all of this sort of like culture war shit, but he hasn't like really leaned into the culture war stuff that much. But it was all a cover. Everything, like all the culture war crap, was all a cover in order to essentially just cut taxes for big business and allow big business to like pollute and all of that shit. And that's what Dennis Prager is. Ultimately, everything that has to do with PragerU videos is all about, like, if you boil it all down, it all comes down to this sort of ultra-libertarian businesses and corporations should be allowed to just run everything and own everything and should pay no taxes. And then also, you should not be able to talk any shit about the United States and not teach actual real history. And that's the real problem with PragerU. We don't even really need to read this. I mean, I guess we could read through it here. I'll just put it down in the thing so you guys can like check it out yourself. Right. Long story short, they're going to start using PragerU as learning materials in the classroom. They've been approved as an official vendor. So what does that mean? That means a school district, for example, can decide to purchase their materials the same way that they purchase like textbooks, and they can purchase curriculums. See, so the way it works is that you have let's turn this shit off, right? We don't really need this right now. We don't even really need to read through it. Just know that it's bad news. But the way it works is that a company will they can make individual textbooks, but they also create entire curriculums that a school can choose to follow or adapt. And so you'll get something like McGraw-Hill, for example, will create textbooks, and then they'll have like an entire curriculum that goes along with that, like say a math book or something. And then and that includes things like lesson plans, and it includes tests and recommended reading and all of this other stuff. And the teacher can take that, use it straight out of the box, or adapt it, add their own shit, whatever, right? And these things usually have to be approved. They usually have to go through a board or whatever. The same way that they have to approve textbooks. There have to be certain standards that they have to reach. Like, you can't have a science book that doesn't teach evolution. You can't. And that's like been one of the big targets for the right wing, especially when it comes to the religious right, is that they want to change those standards. They want to do things like, we can get them to teach evolution and creationism, shit like that. They want to do that kind of thing, right? They've been trying to do this basically for years, trying to sneak in their politics and try to get their politics taught in the classroom, whether it's creationism in science class, whether it's climate change denial, stuff like that. Those are the kind of things that they've been trying to sneak in for years and years and years. And the fact that they've actually, like, that's what makes this disturbing, because PragerU is bullshit. It's like it's basically, it's not a university. It's their YouTube channel. That's what it is. It's a YouTube channel. They make really highly biased videos about really bad things. Basically, just whitewashing history with a conservative bent. What does that mean exactly, right? That means that you never see anything when it comes to conservatives and their version of history that's critical of the United States. Nothing that's ever critical of the accepted sort of white patriarchal version of history. What does that mean? That means things like slavery will be downplayed. You're seeing that in Florida too. There was a story that I just saw that the new standards in Florida says that, like, for example, slavery, they have to teach how slavery can be, like, beneficial to the slave. Like, oh, maybe they learn job skills or whatever. Like, they have to actually teach that now. Like, it's required to teach that in Florida. That's a perfect example. But another example will be something like downplaying Native American genocides by calling, the colonists who came over and basically murdered, like, an entire fucking continent full of people, calling them heroes and stuff. Downplaying things like how they would purposely spread disease through native populations by giving them, for example, trading, like, with plague blankets and stuff. Like, downplaying shit like that. Downplaying things like massacres, like the massacre at Wounded Knee or whatnot. That kind of thing. And just straight up just leaving shit out, when it comes to stuff like that. Leaving out things like, in Canada, for example, you have these boarding schools where for years and years and years they would just basically send native children off and forbid them from learning their, like, native languages, and, like, basically try to assimilate them into white culture for years and years. And then they're finding, like, things like mass graves at these former boarding schools, stuff like that. So it's not, genocide is not just physical, actual, like, murder and death. Like, there's also cultural genocide. That's part of it as well. When you try to just completely erase someone's culture, that's part of genocide also. Forbidding them from learning their heritage, forbidding people from learning their language. That's what happened to slaves. They tore them away from their native lands in Africa and wouldn't allow them to, like, pass on their language and customs and stuff. That's all part of genocide, right? That's the kind of thing that you won't be able to learn in Dennis Prager's classroom, because that's anti-American. I mean, PragerU, then you get an environmental shit. Like, they have an entire playlist of just climate denial stuff, which is just fucking ridiculous. If anything, this past month as, heat waves across the entire fucking country is, like, pretty much put the nail in the coffin for that shit. Right? So that's what makes it dangerous, is that it's just straight up fucking propaganda. And it should be illegal. Should be absolutely illegal. It's like, is Ron DeSantis gonna, if Ron DeSantis becomes president, is he gonna do this on a national scale? Like, you got to think about, like, that's why it's important to vote, folks. Like, I know a lot of leftists out there are not too hip on electoral politics. Yeah, you should vote. You should vote even if your aim is just to prevent people like this from taking power. Even if that's all you're there for. That counts. This is if you look at Florida, what's going on in Florida, Florida's turning into a fucking, like, basically Republican hellhole, and it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well at all, right? Especially for the students there. Students are going to, if this is the kind of shit they're doing in schools, then those kids don't have much of a future, academically at least. And you're going to start seeing it. You're going to start seeing kids graduate high school in Florida and not be able to get into college because they just didn't fucking learn anything. And then you're going to start seeing things like the rates of poverty start to increase there in certain communities. This is what's going to happen, right? It may take a generation But it'll happen. The smart people will get out of Florida. That's what'll fucking happen. And then you'll just be left with like the poor and disadvantaged, the people who had to go to public schools, the kids who were forced to learn this shit and believe that it was real. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they can't get into college anywhere. I mean, I wonder why. Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.